The hum of the airplane filled the cabin, blending with the soft chatter of passengers settling into their seats. Mark adjusted the worn backpack at his feet and glanced at the sleeping little girl leaning against him. His daughter, Lily, clutched her stuffed bunny close, her chest rising and falling gently. Mark kissed her forehead softly and exhaled a sigh that was part exhaustion, part relief. For a single dad who worked 2 jobs and rarely afforded luxuries, this trip was a miracle. Across the aisle, a woman in a tailored blazer typed furiously on her laptop, her expression a mix of focus and tension. Her sleek hair framed sharp cheekbones, and her aura radiated authority. Almost everyone in the cabin had sneaked a glance at her, but she seemed oblivious. She was Claire Donovan, the youngest CEO of a global tech firm, though Mark had no idea who she was. To him, she was just another passenger. The boarding announcement had barely ended when Claire closed her laptop, rubbed her temples, and glanced around for a comfortable position. She had spent 3 sleepless nights in meetings across continents, juggling crises, acquisitions, and impossible decisions. For once, she wasn't traveling in first class. A last-minute change had landed her in economy. And for once, she didn't care. Her body screamed for rest. When the plane leveled into the clouds, Claire leaned back and, almost instinctively, shifted sideways. Her head found a resting place on something warm and surprisingly steady, Mark's shoulder. He stiffened at first, unsure if he should move or wake her, but then noticed the faint lines of exhaustion on her face. She looked like someone who hadn't had a real moment of peace in years. With a small, awkward smile, he stayed still, letting her rest. For the next hour, Mark remained frozen, his shoulder growing numb. Lily stirred once, looked at the sight of the elegant woman leaning on her dad, and whispered with innocent curiosity, "Daddy, is she your girlfriend?" Mark chuckled softly, shaking his head, but the sound didn't wake Claire. Instead, she shifted slightly closer, as though his presence was a shield against the chaos of her world. It wasn't until the turbulence hit that everything changed. The plane jolted, and passengers gasped. Claire's eyes snapped open, confusion flickering across her face as she realized where she had been resting. Embarrassed, she straightened instantly, her cheeks coloring faintly. I'm so sorry," she murmured, smoothing her blazer. Mark smiled gently. "Don't worry about it. You looked like you needed the rest." Something about the kindness in his tone caught her off guard. People rarely spoke to her without expectation, without calculation. She opened her mouth to say something, but Lily's small voice interrupted. "Are you okay, lady?" Claire blinked down at the little girl, who was now wide awake, clutching her bunny with big, curious eyes. "Yes," Claire said softly, her voice losing its corporate sharpness. "I'm okay. Thank you for asking."
Lily grinned. "You were sleeping on my daddy. He snores sometimes, but he's comfy."
Mark groaned lightly, but Claire actually laughed, a genuine laugh that startled her as much as it did him. It had been a long time since she'd laughed without forcing it. The turbulence eased, but something lingered between them. Claire found herself stealing glances at Mark, his simple clothes, the tired circles under his eyes, the protective way he held his daughter's hand. There was no arrogance in him, no agenda, just quiet strength. The flight attendants began serving snacks, and when they reached their row, Mark politely declined. Claire noticed Lily eyeing the cookies hungrily but saying nothing. Her small backpack, with its fading cartoon prints, suggested she was used to not asking for more than she was given. Without overthinking, Claire asked the attendant for an extra pack and handed it to Lily. "Here," she said with a warm smile, "you deserve these." Lily's eyes widened. "For me? Of course, but only if you promise to share a little with your dad." The little girl nodded eagerly, tearing open the pack. Mark gave Claire a grateful look. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly.
"I wanted to," she replied, surprising herself with how true it felt. Hours passed, but the flight didn't feel as long as it should have. Conversation sparked naturally between them, starting with small talk and slowly peeling back layers. Mark shared his story reluctantly, almost embarrassed. He had once dreamed of becoming an architect, but life had other plans. His wife had passed away during childbirth, leaving him with Lily and a mountain of responsibilities. He had set aside his ambitions to raise his daughter, working odd jobs, sometimes cleaning offices, sometimes fixing things, anything to keep food on the table. Claire listened intently, her chest tightening at every word. In her world, people fought over profit margins and stock prices. Here was a man who measured his wealth in bedtime stories and second-hand clothes, yet carried himself with quiet pride.
And you? He asked gently, turning the conversation toward her.
Claire hesitated. I run a company, she said simply, not wanting to reveal too much. But Mark noticed the flicker in her eyes, the weight behind the words. Sounds like a big responsibility, he said kindly. No wonder you were so tired. It was such a simple acknowledgement, but it pierced her more deeply than any corporate recognition ever had. She found herself opening up in ways she never did. She spoke about sleepless nights, impossible expectations, and how lonely success could feel. For the first time in years, she wasn't CEO Claire Donovan, she was just Claire, a woman who longed to be seen beyond her title. As the plane neared its destination, an announcement broke the quiet connection forming between them. A passenger a few rows ahead suddenly collapsed in the aisle. Gasps erupted. A call for medical assistance echoed through the cabin. Without hesitation, Mark sprang into action. He gently handed Lily to Claire, who instinctively wrapped her arms around the little girl, whispering reassurances. Then Mark knelt beside the man, checking for a pulse, his hands steady despite the chaos. Claire's eyes widened. Mark wasn't just some tired single dad. He had training.
Within moments, he was guiding the attendants, performing CPR with calm precision until the man began breathing again. The cabin erupted into applause, relief washing over everyone. Claire looked at him with awe, her heart pounding. When the commotion settled and the man was stabilized, Mark returned to his seat. Claire handed Lily back, her eyes never leaving his face.
You saved his life, she whispered. Mark shrugged modestly. I used to volunteer as an EMT before life got complicated. I just did what anyone would have done. But Claire knew not everyone would have. She felt a lump in her throat. She had sat in boardrooms filled with powerful men and women, yet none of them carried the kind of quiet heroism she had just witnessed. The rest of the flight was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Claire found herself holding Lily's tiny hand even after Mark returned, the child resting peacefully against her. It felt natural, too natural. When the plane finally landed and passengers shuffled off, Claire hesitated. She didn't want the moment to end. At the gate, she turned to him. You may not know this, but you've changed how I see things, she admitted softly. Mark smiled, adjusting Lily's bag on his shoulder. Funny. I could say the same. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, two strangers who had collided midair, yet walked away with something unforgettable. And though neither spoke it aloud, both knew this wasn't the end of their story.